Hello, hello, and apologies for the slight delay in starting there. For once, it wasn't my fault. It was a technical hitch, which is kind of rare. Anyway, my name's Sarah Carolides. I've been a nutritionist for over 20 years, and I am here with Jack Morrison, one of the co-founders of Zooki. And we're starting this webinar series with an enormous topic, which is why most supplements don't work, and hopefully what we can do about it. So, Jack, as a manufacturer coming into the industry, what was it that coming out of university made you want to get into the supplement industry for a start?
Well, with Zooki, the approach that we kind of always took, I think the first thing that we spotted when I was many years younger than I am now, it was more on the experiential side. So my very good friend growing up, a guy called Marcus, he was big into his rugby, and he was taking lots of very big omega-3 fish oil capsules. That was kind of the seed of the idea, was to try and create a better experience than those big capsules. The more that we kind of got into it, we realized that maybe the approach that we should take with Zooki is to not only try and create a better experience, but wouldn't it be great if we could do that and at the same time improve the absorption and the bioavailability and the efficacy? I think that the whole idea of supplements in general is very appealing. To have something that's really convenient, you can get a particular ingredient into your system or multiple ingredients. And we all know deep down with our lifestyles, maybe we don't have the perfect diet.
Yep.
And being able to have something that's quick and convenient to get things into your system and to tick those boxes, that's really appealing. And it doesn't surprise me that supplements are popular, but I think that what we realized very early on is that it just isn't quite as simple. And the things that we became obsessed with, what happens after you actually swallow the supplement or you take a pill, what's the journey that it goes on? Degradation is a massive issue, absorption is a massive issue, and we're going to cover some of these topics today. But I think that what I would round off with the brand, Zooki will be many things to many different people, and people will gravitate to the sort of surface level properties, the taste, the look, the feel, the convenience. But actually what we're passionate about is the innovations in the delivery systems. That's the real magic underneath the surface. And I'm really happy that we're getting chances like this to go a bit deeper. Not everybody who's into Zooki will actually care that much about this stuff, but the fact that we're going to go deeper on some of the issues today, I think is great.
Yeah, it's actually really interesting because the UK supplement industry is actually quite young. There really were not many supplements 30, 40 years ago. It's a relatively young industry that has sprung up, and the stats and the numbers involved are extraordinary. 2023, £568 million spent, projected to grow 5 times faster than the rest of the economy in 2024. But despite that, we know that over 50% of British people are buying and maybe taking a supplement, but only 22% believe they truly work. So what we've got here is a very fast-growing industry with a lot of people jumping on board and a lot of people happy to buy the products, but they don't think they even work.
Yeah, I think the stats are interesting. I don't know what the stat would be, but I think that anybody who's been buying supplements for a long time will know that so many supplements that people buy will be gathering dust in the back of cupboards. And I think that the sad truth that no one really likes to talk about is that the simple reason for that is that many supplements simply do not work.
Yeah.
And some of the reasons we'll dive into today. I think there's sort of 6 reasons that we've honed in on. The levels of the actives is a big one, and there's lots of brands that you can see in the market. There's a couple that spring to mind where they really dial in on that, and they dial in on the fact that these big incumbent companies won't necessarily put in very high levels of ingredients, and I think there is a lot to be said for that. But there's a little bit more to it. The second reason that's on there, is it the right type of ingredient? So even if you've got good levels, is it the right type?
Yes.
And that's going to be influential as well.
Yep. We've identified, we've really tried to look at the whole industry from the conception of an idea when you think, okay, I want to put this certain nutrient as a supplement on the market, and then what happens to it all the way through. So you've got the manufacturing side, and then you've got the physiological side. What happens when somebody's taken the nutrient? Does it actually work when it's inside the body? So we've gone through these 6 different stages, which we're going to go into depth now. So we'll start with the first one, which is, you've just touched on it. The first reason why most supplements don't work is that they don't contain enough of the nutrients for a start. So there is a huge variation in serving size here. And we know that if it hasn't got enough in there, it's obviously not going to work. I mean, it seems obvious, but how do you know when you start to look at a supplement? So we've picked on collagen here, and this is fascinating because we've got a lot of different brands here, and you've got differences in the dosage here from 30 milligrams to 20,000 milligrams. So how does that happen? As a manufacturer, where do you decide to pitch your dosage?
Well, I think there's a lot of different forces that are at play. I think that one of the less obvious ones, if you like, is that there's a huge industry behind the supplement industry, or within it, to do with branded ingredients. And the sort of model that these branded ingredient companies will follow is trying to come up with their own unique ingredient. It has to be unique in some way, even though it might sit under this umbrella of collagen. They try and find a unique point. And then what they'll do is they'll try and run clinical trials on that given ingredient so that they can generate a claim. And that claim is something that brands can make if they use that ingredient. And like, if you think about that as a business model, if the game is to try and generate a claim, if you want to make as much money as possible, you want the strongest possible claims with the least active ingredient. And these branded ingredients companies, sometimes you see, I've seen examples in the collagen market where they've run trials on as low as 30 milligrams. And what does that lend itself to? It lends itself to going inside a capsule, the most convenient of all supplements at a glance, having it in a capsule. But collagen, like, fundamentally is a protein, and you can only fit 1 gram maximum inside a capsule. And like, a lot of the research would suggest that you need 5 grams, 10 grams, even more than that to have a real impact. And so I think sometimes, and kind of ties into this a wider point about the industry to do with RDIs for supplementations. Collagen doesn't necessarily have a recommended daily intake. It does for protein, but RDIs is another reason that you'll see brands that are putting in the bare minimum to make a claim or to justify a health claim.
So what they're kind of doing is expecting the consumer to know how much they need to have an optimal effect in the body. Really, they're taking advantage of the fact the consumer doesn't know that.
Yeah, or relying on the fact that they don't. So for example, when you think about the RDI, so the recommended daily intake, this was a system that was designed with scurvy in mind. That was one of the biggest drivers, and it was a system where to get your 100% of your daily intake, your recommended daily intake, this wasn't about optimizing human health. It wasn't about delivering benefits. This was about avoiding death, if you like, or avoiding certain things happening because you have a deficiency. And within Europe, within EFSA, which the UK sits within, they have a system that's to do with health claims. So for example, if you look at vitamin C, there's a number of health claims that you can make. So if we sell a vitamin C product, as long as we've got about 15%, it depends on the claim, but between 15% and 30% of the recommended daily intake of vitamin C,
so
which is
even
tiny,
lower, exactly.
Which is tiny. Yeah, it's a tiny amount. Then we can make the claims, the normal function of the immune system. It will help to combat tiredness and fatigue. It will support normal collagen formation. You can make the same claims about a vitamin C product if you've got 30 milligrams in or if you've got 1,000 milligrams. Like, the framework, that sort of marketing and claims framework, does not lend itself to the most effective supplements being able to distinguish themselves. It lends itself to the companies putting in the bare minimum amount to make a claim. And so I think that's a huge issue, and why you see so much variation is you've got companies coming at it from multiple angles. The big sort of whale traditional companies, the big incumbents that have been at this for years, over time they've optimized it from a cost perspective.
Of course.
So putting in the bare minimum amount. Turmeric, I think, is on the slide.
This is another interesting one now, isn't it? Because this isn't about the amount of turmeric, it's about the amount of active ingredient. So do you want to explain that one?
Yeah, so within turmeric, the active ingredient within the turmeric root, which only makes up, I think, less than 1% of the turmeric root is the curcuminoids. The
Right.
curcuminoids are what's going to have a sort of beneficial impact. Yeah, there's lots of stuff in turmeric, but curcumin has been honed in on, like, that's the real active ingredient. And when you look at the market, a lot of people will refer to them as turmeric supplements. And when you go onto Amazon and you're looking for a turmeric supplement, you're going to type in turmeric supplement. You might even type in turmeric supplement high strength, whatever it is. And a lot of the brands will position themselves around trying to shout about, like, the highest dose of turmeric.
Yeah.
And I think that when you actually look under the hood of some of these supplements, and you'll see it in the graph, there's actually a massive variation in how much curcumin, which is the active ingredient within turmeric, are present in the supplements. And I think that, like, that's a great example of how this asymmetry of information. Look, when Amazon is putting so much downward pressure on the price, like, these types of things are bound to happen. Turmeric powder is cheap, okay? Higher levels of curcumin is very expensive. So, like, again, like, we talk about some of the forces that are at play behind the scenes. Like, you see that play out in this market, and if customers don't know what they're looking for, you got to look at how much. Okay, yes, you want to know that it's come from turmeric, but how much curcumin in there? That's what's going to have a real impact.
Because that's got to be extracted from the turmeric, and that's what's expensive, isn't it?
Exactly, yeah.
There's something I should have said at the beginning, which is, if anyone has any questions going through, please put them on the live chat, and we'll try and get to as many as possible at the end. I should have said that at the beginning. So why is... Okay, we've mostly covered that reason then of why there is this difference in amounts, in dosages and supplements. Let's move on to the second reason. They may have nutrients in there. Okay, we're going to assume they've got enough nutrients, but are they the right type of nutrients? And there's two particular areas here. Nutrients come in different form naturally. Okay, one of the big ones is D3 and D2, or maybe heme iron and non-heme iron, things like that. They are naturally different forms of a specific nutrient. But we've got magnesium on the slide here. This is 10 different types of magnesium. How on earth would you know how well these are absorbed and what they're going to work for? I mean, we've got magnesium citrate, which is the one that people take mostly for constipation. It can help alleviate constipation.
But I also think that there'll be a lot of people that go into the market looking for a magnesium supplement. Friend recommends, oh, you should be taking magnesium.
Yeah.
Okay, I would conjecture that 90% of the recommendations for magnesium will go as far as to say, you should be taking magnesium, I'm taking it and it's great. Somebody might be going into the market saying, I want to take magnesium because I want it to give me some muscle relaxation, or I want it to help me sort of wind down in the evenings and help me to relax. If they pick up the wrong type of magnesium, it's going to have probably the opposite effect. If it's a magnesium,
certainly a different effect anyway.
Very different.
Well
maybe that is relaxing in some ways. I don't know.
Definitely. And there's things like calcium as well. Calcium carbonate, the most common type of calcium in the supplement market, is really not very well absorbed. So back to those magnesiums. Some of them will be absorbed well, like the magnesium glycinate. Some of them won't be absorbed as well. The same with calcium, same with lots of different forms. So these are natural different forms of nutrients. But I think what's more shocking to me is the synthetic nutrients that get into some of the really big brands. And we've got an example here of the biggest selling multivitamin brand on the planet. And you've got some really bad offenders here. There is the vitamin E. They've put in a synthetic form of vitamin E, which is called DL-alpha tocopherol acetate. Bit of a mouthful. It tells you it's synthetic for a start, doesn't it really? That is a waste product from the petrochemical industry. It is literally formed from what is left over in oil production. Then you've got thiamine mononitrate. It's a synthetic form of vitamin B6 derived from coal tar. I mean, these are horrifying, and this isn't a health product. These shouldn't be anywhere near the body, let alone marketed as a health product. The last one I've highlighted, chromium-3 chloride. That is a completely inorganic, mass-produced chemical that has no business being anywhere near the human body. So we've mentioned natural different forms of ingredients that people are going to get confused about. And then there's also the synthetic forms that, again, you spoke about the pressures to get something cheap onto the shelf in Amazon, a real bestseller. So manufacturers are going to be tempted to use these, aren't they?
Yeah, I think, again, like, it kind of comes back to some of the forces that are at play in the background. Like that there is a product which is owned by a big pharmaceutical company that I won't name the company. But I think that there's everything about that formulation strike. So there's certainly within the formulation, there's good examples of it where they're thinking more about the unit economics of the product. What can we get in there? What's the claims that we can make? What's the cheapest source of the ingredient? How many pills can we get inside a tub? How many tubs can we fit on a pallet? How many countries can we fling these pallets to around the world? And how much profit we can make. And look, the market, these are businesses, and we get that profit is important, but I think it's interestingly, for like a new business with Zooki coming into this market, when you really survey the space, you start to notice that like the bigger these companies get and the more powerful they get and the better the distribution gets, the more they start to flex on the cost side. And it becomes less about designing a product which is as effective as possible for the customer and more about satisfying shareholders. And that tension, I think, is something that plays out, not just in the supplement industry, but in many industries. And I think that that's why there's always going to be a place for supplement companies and startups and nutrition businesses to come into this market and put the customer at the front. Now, just quickly whilst we're on that, like the notion of putting the customer first, like Amazon will shout about this a lot. There's huge downward pressure on the price of Amazon supplements. Like anybody who's ever sold products on Amazon, there's literally boxes that you can tick on the back end, which will say, I want to undercut whatever the cheapest price is. Like you can set this up so it's automated. It creates huge downward pressure on the price. And that creates a scenario where you've got a race to the bottom on price and a race to the bottom on quality. And sometimes it's not even the brands that are responsible for that, because the brands will put the pressure on the manufacturers. And another thing that many people watching won't realize is that probably 95%, if not 99% of the brands on the market, they'll outsource their manufacturing. Very few of them will manufacture products in-house. And so when you have this situation where there's huge competition on price, exacerbated by the systems that Amazon have put in place to supposedly put the customer first, you get a situation where the brands are pitting the manufacturers against one another. The manufacturers, and this kind of ties into the next point that we're going to talk about, the manufacturers are competing to supply the brands. And it just isn't that surprising that you get situations that arise where cheap ingredients are used. And sometimes, which is number 3 on the list, supplements don't always contain what they say.
Yeah, this is interesting because this can be something, like you said, from the manufacturer. This can kind of creep into the pathway that the brands might not even know about, or maybe they do. But we want to highlight, there was a study that came out last year where researchers in America bought 57 different supplements off the shop shelf. I think they were mostly they were sports supplements mostly. And they tested them to see whether they actually contained what they said they did on the label. So I'm going to ask you a few questions here, Jack. I'm going to test your knowledge here of the industry. What percentage of these 57 supplements on the shop shelf do you think contained 0 nutrients? That's 0 of what they said they did. Just take a guess.
I don't. Are people putting in the comments? Do they want to test themselves?
I don't know. We might have to wait a while for that.
Well, I think maybe we just give 10 seconds. So the question is, what percentage contained 0 nutrients? So, like, I presume that this question is saying that if you have a vitamin C product on the shelf, or even a multivitamin, like what percentage of the nutrients that were tested for actually had 0 in there? It has to be, if it's 0, like it has to be, I would have thought it would be a low percentage, maybe like 10, 15%.
Should we show the answer? 40%. 40% of those 57, these are common brands on the shop shelf. They were mostly sports related. There were a lot of sort of botanicals and things in there, herbals and whatever. 40% of them had 0% of the nutrients that they said they did.
I'd love to know what the nutrients were. Like, I'd love to know like whether there are like specific nutrients where they're cutting corners. But that's shocking.
Well, they're certainly cutting corners. Okay, next question. What percentage, so we've taken out the ones that contained 0%, what percentage contained some of the nutrients but not the amount displayed on the label? And I know there's some leeway, isn't there? Legally, you can have a bit above, a bit below the amount that you state you do. Is that right?
I think you can have, I think it's 20% below and 50% above. And you'd like to think that brands would want to land on the right side of that equation. But based on the question, 50%, 60%.
Okay, incorrect amounts. It was, in fact, another 50%, which means that of those original 57 supplements, only 10% of them were correctly labeled. And there's just another little question that they also answered in the study that they looked at. What percentage, now this was an American study, so we're talking about FDA overall legislation and what have you. What percentage of these supplements contained illegal additives? We're talking about, well, I don't know, sports, I would imagine it's kind of steroids, things like that. I'm guessing a bit, but anyway, illegal additives, what percentage of them contained things that the FDA would say were illegal? Any idea?
5%?
5%?
10%?
The answer was 10%.
10%.
10%. And this is not just an American problem. There was an Australian study a few years previously that out of 135 supplements tested showed that only 20%, 1 in 5 of them, had their ingredients confirmed by lab testing. So in other words, 80% of them did not have the ingredients confirmed, which was a UK study, I think, found supplements from three big UK high street retailers did not contain what was on the label. And that's even within that leeway of, the 50% above and 20% below. And then there was a BBC investigation a few years ago. You know about this one, don't you? This is BBC Two, and they looked at CBD products. And I know you were involved in CBD a little bit, so...
Yeah, I remember this one, and I remember being really shocked at the time because when CBD kind of burst onto the scene, and we were, in the very early days, we don't do it so much anymore. We don't sell it online. There's all sorts of regulatory knots that are trying to work their way through at the moment. So like it's very difficult to sell CBD products online. So we don't do that. But in the early days, we sold quite a bit of CBD, and we were one of the first businesses that were coming to market. I remember being hyper paranoid about the testing because there's within CBD oils, whether it was a broad spectrum or a full spectrum at the time, and a lot of these oils were coming out of the US, where they don't necessarily have the same strict laws in place about THC content, with THC being the psychoactive component of CBD oil. So third-party testing and testing was a massive thing. Like we would test it before it left, we would test it when it arrived. And when I heard about this one, this was a brand that was one of the more prominent brands. And when this study came out, it transpired that not only did they have, it wasn't a case where it was like, oh, we had a bit less in than we said we had in there. They had zero. They had zero in there.
Nothing.
So they were selling like a 10% CBD oil. And I think that what they were doing is they were hiding behind the fact that it was a hemp seed oil, rather than an oil, an extract from the rest of the plant. So I think in the seeds there's very few, if any, cannabinoids. But yeah, and I think the fact that they were still on the market now, it just screams that there just isn't the regulatory framework in place. Some of the business, if you put yourself in the shoes of a customer, like we all are, stood on the floor, looking at the shelf. Yeah. The only thing you've really got to go off at the moment, is do you trust the brand? Do you actually trust that this brand has in there what they say they have in there? There is a few certifications that are coming through to the market. I think we've got a slide. So Informed Sport is a better known one. Informed Sport, if you think about it, the stakes are very high.
Yeah, that's
for
really
athletes.
important, isn't it? Yeah, they can't have anything.
Can't have banned substances.
Not on the label. Yeah,
they've got a whole list of things that are banned. So you can see why there's a certification like Informed Sport, but there's nothing that's actually fighting the battle and putting trust into the supply chain for regular people. Because if I was a victim of that CBD brand and I bought their CBD oil and it actually had no CBD in, I'm none the wiser. There's no recourse for me, and so all you can really go off right now is trust in the brands. There's new certifications coming through. So Trusted Label is a really interesting one because they're coming into the market with a certification which isn't just for professional athletes, but actually designed to install trust into the supply chain. I mentioned before that every stage of the supply chain, all the way through, there are unfortunately incentives to cut corners, to do with cost, to do with profit. And I think that having these certification marks, I'd look out for Trusted Label. You'll start to see, I think they've got a program going on at the moment with a retailer in London called John Bell Croydon, but I think you'll start to see it branch out because there is absolutely, the market is crying out for this. Because right now, without systems like Trusted Label are putting in place, how do you actually know that a
Yeah.
product has in it what it says it has in it, even if the brand says, we do third-party testing? A lot of the brands, like, sorry if I'm going hard on this point, but I think it's a really interesting one. A lot of the brands will rely on the certificates of analysis from the manufacturers. And actually, when you look at those, quite often they're internal COAs.
Right.
They're not necessarily done with UCAS accredited laboratories. So I think that this point around testing, it's a nuanced one, but it's another big reason why there are supplements that simply don't work.
Yes.
And the brands that are pushing them may be blissfully unaware.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've just taken us to the consumer on the shop floor looking at a shelf of supplements, which brings us very nicely into the next point. How do we know if these supplements are actually stable on the shop shelf or on the cupboard shelf? How do we know that when you open the tub or the bottle or whatever, that they're still going to be as efficacious as they were when you first opened, or even if they are at all? There was one study that we found that showed that 10% of fish oil supplements bought from major retailers had gone completely rancid, and that another 50% of them were just under the maximum recommended limit for oxidation going rancid. So what's that is saying that most omega-3 fish oil supplements are rancid by the time you buy them. How do we guard against that?
Well, I think that this is an interesting one, and this was an issue that we cottoned on to quite early because we were looking. Omega-3 was the first product that we ever did, and that it always stuck with me, like what's actually going on when something goes rancid. What we're saying is that it's oxidized, and with fish oil, it's a great example because you only need, I think it's 9 parts in a billion before you start to notice the fishiness. And the example I would give you is if you were ordering fish in a restaurant. So say you ordered a plate of salmon and they brought it out to the table and it stunk of fish.
Yeah.
It was a fishy plate of salmon. What you're going to do, you're going to send it back. You're going to send it back because the fish, it isn't fresh. It's gone off. And the answer is it's oxidized. It's starting to go rancid. It doesn't have to go very rancid, but it's starting to go rancid. And I think that if anybody's watching at home, this is a sad truth of the omega-3 supplement market. Is if you bite into one of those capsules, you already know that what you're going to taste is going to be fishy. And the sad truth is that means it's oxidized. And if it's oxidized, there's free radicals, and you're supplementing with something that is probably going to do more harm than good. And that's been going on for years and years and years. And there's kind of like there's a stigma almost, like people that are taking fish oil, even in its raw form, there's almost this consensus that if it tastes badly, it must be doing me good. And like, I think with oils like fish oils, like it's completely untrue. Like you need it to be fresh. You need it to be fresh so that it hasn't oxidized, it isn't rancid. That's where it can really benefit you. I think there's some other examples.
Yes, there are. I mean, some of the water-soluble ones like B vitamins, they're incredibly light sensitive. And also, the liquids, that if you've got a bottle of something, they will start to oxidize the second the seal is broken, isn't it? Probiotics is another one.
Probiotics is a good one. I know that like we've done a probiotic product. We're currently investing in a lot of R&D. We are fascinated by, like, we've worked a lot with delivery systems for increasing bioavailability and absorption, but with probiotics it's a very different problem.
Yeah.
And one of the challenges, survival of the bacteria through to the large intestine, and hopefully we'll have lots more to talk about that in the future. But there's another massive challenge, and the challenge is around shelf life, stability of probiotics. And every time I go into a shop and look at the array of products that are just on the shelf rather than being chilled, yes, maybe there's some exceptions. Like our product it's a weird looking product. It's a liquid product, but it actually has 0% moisture. It's in an airtight syringe. We bind the bacteria with lactoferrin to improve the survival rates. But there's a lot of probiotic products that are just a probiotic powder in a capsule, and they'll say that, oh yeah, it's fine to stick on the shop shelf. There's just no way. And it's another issue. Like, it's quite challenging to test probiotic products. Like, once they've been made, you can test it at the point of manufacturer. Testing over the course of the shelf life is much more difficult. So I think that's a really good example. But I think the general principle does apply, is that most of the COAs in the industry are done at the point of manufacture. Not many people are checking the stability on the shelf. Even the fact that we put our liquids into sachets, that was done for stability reasons. Like very convenient, great, we can sell them individually. Like that was a fortuitous accident, if you like. The main driving force behind why we put them into a sachet is because we want every serving to be as effective as the last. And it is not possible, especially when you've got supplements as sensitive as liposomal supplements, that if you're halfway through a bottle, oxygen will be in there and it will be oxidizing over time. So yeah, I think that again, like it's a subtle point, but I think stability through the shelf life of a supplement is something that not a lot of supplement companies will talk about.
Well, it's really important. If you've got a bottle of something, even if it's a fairly expensive product and you've put it in the fridge and you've gone on holiday for a week or two and you come back and open it again, it's just not going to be as useful as it was. It's not going to be as efficient, useful, anything as it was at the beginning, is it?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, we've basically covered everything now, from the manufacturer through to the consumer checking on the shop shelf that they've got a good product. They bring it home, they open it, they're going to consume it fast. What happens now once the supplement gets inside the system? So the first thing is the supplement will go into the stomach, which we know is a highly acidic environment. So there's a study here that showed us that 80% of most normal vitamin C supplements become oxidized after 2 hours in simulated stomach acid conditions. So let's just talk about something here. We are designed to get our nutrients from real food and real drinks. Evolutionarily, we would have been grazing, a lot of fruits, vegetables, so on and so forth, and the nutrients in those are effectively protected by the fiber, the proteins, the fats, anything else around them, to get them through the stomach into the small intestine. So now you're taking something concentrated, which we know we want to do because we want the effects and we're not grazing around in a nice organic field of oranges all day. But you take that into the stomach and what happens? Most of it gets degraded.
Yeah, I think it comes back to, like the idea behind a supplement is great. And it's not a surprise that it's an appealing proposition, but it's just, even though the companies would like to believe it, like from an economics perspective and from a cost perspective, great, people want to take vitamin C. Vitamin C is the thing within oranges that's been isolated as being beneficial. What we're going to do is we're going to take that nutrient, we're going to get a really concentrated dose, we're going to compress it into a tablet, and people are going to buy them by the tub load, and they're going to swallow them and hope for the best. And like this is one of the biggest issues that isn't talked about, and I think will be talked about more and more, and I even think that this is going to creep into the regulatory space as well, is that this issue, the first hurdle that happens on that journey is you have to survive the stomach.
Yeah.
And we did a study. For those of you that don't know, like our whole emphasis is on how do we design delivery systems? How do we recognize the journey that the nutrients have to go on in order for you to benefit from it? How do we design a delivery system that can survive that first hurdle?
So you're reprotecting the nutrient, aren't you? You've taken a nutrient out of the real food and now you've got to protect it again to get it through the stomach.
Yeah, you have to acknowledge that it's a pretty harsh environment in the stomach. And so wrapping the nutrient in effectively what is a bubble of lipids called a liposome, a sort of jewel layer, that's what we call it, that's the delivery system.
Yep.
The first job it's going to do is it's going to help the nutrient, rather than the vast majority of it being destroyed in the stomach, the vast majority is going to make it through. And that's like one of the first big problems that these delivery systems solve for. So I think like there's a couple of graphs here. Those some, I don't know if we've actually published the glutathione one before, but we did a couple of different studies. We have a delivery system that works in a liquid format, a sort of standard liposomal product where, again, the nutrient is wrapped in a lipid sphere. When you compare that to, we did this in vitro, so this was done in the laboratory, or we didn't do it, experts did it, academics did it. When you compare the degradation of a standard vitamin C, so your typical vitamin C, raw, unprotected form, if you compare that with a protected vitamin C in like a Zooki liposomal encapsulation, you get about 10 times more of the nutrient will be destroyed in its raw form. Yeah. It's like it's massive, and nobody's talking about that because it isn't very convenient to talk about. It's not the sort of thing that you want to bring up when it's really cost effective to sell tubs and tubs and tubs of compressed vitamin C.
Sure.
So we protect the nutrients as it travels through the system. We've also developed a delivery system for a dry format, and there's nuance to that. So you're creating the same sort of lipid sphere, but there is a very clever step that allows you to overcome when it's dehydrated down. It effectively, that lipid sphere, we maintain that structure as it collapses down around the nutrient. So you're still getting, even though it's in a dry form, you've still got a dual lipid layer that has collapsed around the nutrient, and there's some really clever steps that have been patented around that. But the studies show that we did this study on glutathione, so we were comparing our dry liposome encapsulated glutathione with an unencapsulated glutathione, and you'll see again, like I think it's 8 times more of the nutrients are destroyed in the raw form.
Yeah.
Like these ingredients, like especially in high concentrations that you find in supplements, they are really sensitive to your digestive system. So like having products that, even if you've got the right levels of the active, like we talked about it at the start, even if you've got good levels of actives that are impactful levels, even if you've got the right amount in there, even if you've tested it, if you haven't given thought to how it's going to survive the stomach, then again, like you're wasting your money.
Completely. And then, okay, so we've got something now, we've protected it, we've got it through the stomach, it's into the small intestine, which is where 90% of our absorption goes on. That brings us to the next hurdle of why most supplements don't work, is because they don't actually get absorbed into the bloodstream. And if we stay on vitamin C here for one of them, we know that vitamin C, it's like a curve that levels off. I've forgotten the name for it at the moment.
It's non-linear.
It's non-linear, thank you very much. Yes, so vitamin C is absorbed linearly up to a certain amount, but beyond that, we can't. The body's not designed to take in any more. So do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so I think this may be intuitive. I don't know whether I just like this visualization, but if you think about like how we've evolved, we were hunter-gatherers, and we had a sort of steady stream of nutrients that came through from fruit and vegetables that we picked up on the floor as we went about our business on the hunt. And it's not really surprising when you think about that our bodies aren't designed to take really concentrated high doses of nutrients in one go.
Even if we need them.
Even if we need them, our bodies prefer a sort of steady stream. And so like vitamin C is a great example where once you go beyond about 200 milligrams, so it's linear in terms of how much you absorb into the bloodstream, up to about 200 milligrams. And there's loads of research on this. Once you go beyond 200 milligrams, that's when you start to see a diminishing return. So you can take as much vitamin C as you want. Yeah. You can have I think the stat there was a 500% increase in vitamin C. It's only going to deliver a 20% increase in the amount that you're going to absorb into the bloodstream. What is the reason for this? Okay, is that we have the way that the body will absorb from the gut into the bloodstream is that we will have these protein channels. And these protein channels are your typical absorption pathways. You can see it on the animation there, I think, on the screen.
This is active transport.
This is active transport, yeah. So like you have a scenario where, in a normal scenario where you're getting your vitamin C from your food and not from your supplement, these protein channels do a great job. You have a steady stream of the nutrient, they pass through these protein channels, but when you ramp up the concentration, as we like to do with supplements, these protein channels actually become bottlenecks for absorption. And that becomes a real issue, because a lot of it, some of it will get absorbed, but a lot of it will just go to waste. And again, even if it's made it past the stomach and it hasn't been oxidized there, it's a sad fact that lots of it will just be flushed down the toilet, because you can only cope with so much.
That's it. So what you're saying is if you're taking a gram of vitamin C in a supplement, the body, the active transport system, can only cope with maybe 200 milligrams or whatever that is of that. It can only absorb.
Yeah, and the reason that 1,000 milligrams is the limit for vitamin C in the UK is that once you go beyond that, you start to get gastric upset.
Right.
So if you're somebody that wants to have high levels of vitamin C circulating in your system, you can only do so much with a standard supplement. And what liposomes allow us to do, as well as protecting nutrients from degradation in the stomach, they also allow you to bypass those typical absorption channels. So I think there's an animation there that will play out where you can see the liposomes will go through a different route.
Right.
So you're avoiding those bottlenecks that occur in your standard protein channels. The typical active transport is bypassed. And like this is one thing that a lot of people don't understand. Maybe it's intuitive that the same things that surround our cells, the same things that cover the sort of the lining of the gut, that's what we're using. We're using lipids to encapsulate the nutrients. And that is it's a little bit of a biohack. It's a little bit of a cheat with respect to those absorption pathways. And it allows you to absorb so much more of the nutrient.
So have you shown that actually? Have you got any?
Yeah, there's a trial. We've done a trial. So we did, as well as the trial on degradation in the stomach, we've demonstrated for both liquid and the dry liposomal encapsulations, you can achieve about 4 times more absorption, which you can see from the graphs. There's a much bigger peak. So what this graph is showing, you've got 2 groups here. There's 2 different studies. The study on the left is vitamin C. The study on the right is the bioavailability curve for the glutathione study. Now, the 2 lines that you see on the graph, one is a group of individuals. I think we did it groups of 12, but we did it as a crossover design. So there was 24 participants. The reason it's called a crossover design is that both groups will do both doses. So like one group will go through with the liposomal vitamin C, another group will take the regular vitamin C, will measure their blood plasma levels of vitamin C over time. I think it's over a 48-hour window with multiple measurements of the blood. And what you'll see is that over that period, after taking the same dose, one dose is in a raw, unprotected form, the other dose is wrapped in a Zooki Liposomal Encapsulation, that delivery system, you get about 4 times more absorption. And that, you see the peak value at the start, and then it follows a sort of similar curve on the way down. The overall exposure to that nutrient, so the overall bioavailability, the overall absorption, is actually defined by that area under the curve.
Got it.
So yeah, quite staggering.
Yeah, okay. So we've managed to get the supplement into the bloodstream. Here's the big question. Does a higher absorption of a nutrient actually translate into greater health benefits? Have you got any results there to show us?
Yeah, I think so. I think in some ways it's an intuitive leap to make. Yeah. So for some people, it's enough to say, oh look, you're going to absorb more, therefore you're going to benefit more. I think I also can put another hat on and say, high absorption, so what? Yeah. And I think that like that is something that we really wanted to dial into. There was a lot of gaps in the research. There were some studies that looked at degradation, some studies that looked at absorption, but not many that actually look at efficacy. And there's for a webinar another day, we can talk about the barriers to supplement companies actually running research. But so we wanted to really hone in on that. Like, okay, we've done the absorption, we've demonstrated that. We've demonstrated the degradation. What about efficacy? It's ultimately the reason that you're taking the products and the reason that you'd reach for a Zooki product, I'd like to think, is because you know that it's going to be effective. But can we prove that? So like the first study that we did, this was done with St. Mary's University. It was done on our turmeric product. And this one, which will all be published in due course, I don't think we've formally announced it yet, but there was a study at St. Mary's University. The study was, it was looking at the effects of curcumin supplementation on exercise-induced muscle damage. And so the participants of this study, there was 3 groups. We had a placebo group, it's about 10 to 12 in each group. We had a placebo group, we had a single dose group, and we had a double dose group. And we had to create a placebo product for this. So we had to look and smell and taste as close as we could to turmeric. We had to put it in blank sachets. And each group would go through what was a really rigorous exercise protocol. It was a protocol that was designed to damage the muscles, because when you damage the muscles, you get abnormal spikes in inflammatory markers and several other biomarkers. So these 3 groups were put through their paces, their muscles were damaged, and then what we looked at was what was the effect of the 3 different groups. And we looked at muscle soreness was one of them. So we found that there was statistically significant impact for both the single group and the double group with respect to muscle soreness versus the placebo. And then really interestingly, which is when this gets published, I think it will be a very big result for the curcumin market as a whole. Even though it was our product in the study, I think it's a big result for curcumin as a supplement. It had an impact, a statistically significant impact on the bringing the inflammatory markers back to normal levels.
Right.
And I thought that was fascinating. But naturally, you might object to the design of that study because our product was the only one in there. Yes, it had a placebo group. Yes, it was designed rigorously.
Yeah.
But what would be great is if we could deduce, okay, what happens if you compare a liposomal product with a placebo, but also with a normal supplement, and measure the outcomes there? And that's exactly what we did in a study with our iron product.
This is really important. Iron is such a big issue for so many people. One of the most common deficiencies in the world, iron deficiency anemia.
Yeah, so all of the participants, this was 60 participants. There were 3 groups.
Yep.
20 people were in them. All of the participants were mildly anemic. And the reason mildly anemic caused by iron deficiency. So every single person in this study, we knew that they were mildly anemic, or the researchers did and the doctors did. The reason it was mildly anemic and not severely anemic is that you wouldn't and shouldn't get ethics committee sign-off to give somebody who is severely anemic a placebo. But mildly anemic is okay. So there was 3 groups: placebo, regular iron supplement, a standard iron supplement, and the same equivalent dose, but encapsulated in our liposomal delivery system. And it was the liquid product there that you see. Now, this is one of the first times, I think, and we're going to do more research like this because I think this is exactly the sort of area we need to drill into, which is, can we demonstrate, not just intuitively leap and infer, but can we demonstrate in numbers that high bioavailability and efficacy go hand in hand? And iron is a brilliant example because not only will the iron that makes it into your bloodstream, only iron that makes it into your bloodstream is going to impact your hemoglobin levels, and that's part of what was measured. In the study, and we saw that there was a statistically significant difference not only between the groups that were taking iron and the placebo, but there was a 50% bigger impact on hemoglobin with those that were given the Zooki iron supplement, those that were given the active ingredient that was encapsulated in this delivery system. That's a phenomenal result. And I think that, like, the other side to that, which is partly why we chose iron, is that it's not just about the efficacy piece, which we demonstrated, but anybody who's watching this or who will watch it that has ever taken iron, one of the biggest issues is the side effects.
Yes.
And the iron that causes the side effects is not the iron that gets absorbed, it's the iron that doesn't get absorbed and that stays in the gut. That's the iron that wreaks havoc. And you suffer with all sorts of stomach discomfort. So in this case, because we were able to increase the absorption of the iron, not only did it have a greater impact on bringing hemoglobin levels back into a normal place, but it also had no side effects. And if you look at the group that took the iron, that were unfortunate enough to be given the standard iron supplement, whilst it did have an impact on their hemoglobin levels, it did cause really bad side effects. So we're really proud of that study. It's going through the ringer now, so the final drafts are being produced. It's going to be submitted to all sorts of academic journals, and hopefully within the next 9 to 12 months, you'll start to see some of the research that we're doing actually get published, because it's new research, and we're trying to ask the right questions.
Definitely. Well, that's amazing. I think we've covered a load of ground there. We really have. And then we could go into a deep dive on each one of those sections on getting a supplement from the drawing table to the intestines and into the bloodstream. I'm wondering, we've got a little bit of time left. Do we have any questions that have come in?
We do. The first question is, are liquid supplements better than capsules or tablets, and why?
Okay, interesting one. And actually, I'd love to bring in more things like gummies and powders and all sorts, because there's such a plethora of choice out there. It's really confusing for the consumer. It's going to be nuanced, isn't it? Because there are going to be some really good liquids and some really rubbish capsules and all sorts. But in general, what have you found? So when you were choosing to make your supplements, what drew you to the liquid form?
Well, there's loads of, depending on the format, there's pros and cons. So I think that with respect to absorption, so let's assume for a second that you have a liquid product with the same level of active ingredient with a dry product. Let's assume that, yeah, so they're an equal comparison as best as possible. What you'll find is that, and a lot of work has been done in pharmaceuticals on this, because obviously drug delivery is a massive topic, and they looked at modelling the stomach, and they looked at how the rate of digestion differed between a capsule and a liquid. And I think one of the things that came out of that research is that liquids have an advantage because they get through your digestive system quicker. And so that kind of ties back a little bit in with the degradation point, is that maybe there's more time for degradation to occur, because for the capsules, liquids have an advantage as they get into your system a little bit quicker. So there's a speed advantage. There's also like, that's one side as well, like when you're looking at the levels of active, like collagen is a good example. Yeah. Like if you're taking a collagen capsule, the max you can get into a collagen capsule is about 1 gram. Yep. So like the liquids have a sort of a bigger volume, bigger surface area, that can help with absorption as well, but even just like the sheer amount of active that you can get in there. But what I would caveat that with is, that isn't to say that all capsules are bad. Like capsules can be designed in such a way to deliver great bioavailability. So we mentioned, like, we've done a lot of work on that dry delivery system. You'll see, many of you won't have seen yet, but we will be launching a full range of capsules that incorporates that dry delivery system. It is really challenging to sort of sustain that encapsulation and sustain that lipid structure as the liposome is dehydrated, and we have a patented technique, or a patent pending technique for how we do that. But the studies have shown, like, you can still, as long as you maintain that lipid structure surrounding the nutrient, you can deliver, I think it was 8 times more, less degradation of the nutrient, and 4 times more absorption into the bloodstream. So whilst, to round off the question, I would summarise by saying that liquids are probably slightly better than capsules. Yeah. But if the capsules are done right, they can be great as well.
We haven't mentioned tablets. My experience with tablets is that they are probably the most heavily degraded in the stomach compared to capsules. So there's a whole other webinar here. I'd love to talk about the sprays as well.
I think formats is an interesting topic, because it's not always simple. It's not always like for like. I think you mentioned there about capsules. Like, there's lots of companies that will innovate on the capsule itself. Yeah. And at some point in the future, that we could definitely go deep on that, because we're doing a little bit of work on that as well.
We've had lots of questions around, can you mix Zooki with smoothies, water and yogurt without destabilising the liposomes?
Yeah, I think, so what you definitely can't do is, you couldn't put Zooki into like a cup of tea or something that's really hot.
Or you just don't like tea?
The heat. I love a cup. I don't think you should denature a good brew with the Zooki product, but you definitely couldn't put it into really hot liquids. That would definitely denature it. I think that you can mix it in. If you think about what the solution is, like, it's already an emulsion. Any liposomal solution is an emulsion in the sense that there is water there. If you're adding it to water, as long as it's not really hot water, you're just diluting that emulsion further. So it can be stable. But what I would say is, if you're going to make it up into a drink, which lots of people do, don't leave it out on the side for half an hour before you drink it. Like, if you, or even an hour, it will be generally stable for enough time to drink it. But I wouldn't make it up into a drink, put it into a jug of water, and stick the jug of water in the fridge and then drink it the following day. Like, if you're going to make it up, drink it. But generally speaking, it should be absolutely fine. Smoothies are fine. Yogurts. I wouldn't put it, if you're going to put it in the blender, I wouldn't put ice in the blender with it. Again, like, it's those extremes of temperature that you'd want to avoid. But bear in mind, like, we're talking about encapsulation on a tiny, tiny scale. Like, the average size of these liposomes is somewhere between 100 and 250 nanometers. Like, you should be absolutely fine in a lot of those scenarios. It's more the time thing. Like, you mentioned before about bottles. If you're buying a liposomal product in a bottle, you just have to be prepared. Like, maybe there is a cost advantage, but you have to be prepared that the moment you break the seal on that bottle, oxygen will get in and it will start to oxidize. And if liposomes are sensitive to anything, it isn't necessarily mixing it into a drink. No. It's the exposure to oxygen for a period of time. And they're more sensitive to oxidation than they are to blenders.
Got it.
Another question is, for those that might find the Zooki sachets too sweet, is there anything you can recommend them mixing it with, or is Zooki bringing out anything on the horizon for them?
there's sort of, well, two things, probably three. All of them mix really well with water.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that some people find that the taste can be quite harsh.
Some people, when it's concentrated straight, yeah.
Some people love that, but the sharpness of the taste, it isn't because there's sugar in the products. Like sometimes we use ingredients like glycerin, which comes from coconuts, and that has a sort of sharpness to it, and it's because it's got a slightly lower moisture level that it creates a sort of sharp taste. I think that it's very difficult to please everybody. But I would say is that there's very few scenarios where you have somebody that hates it in a sachet that doesn't like it in water. I think that people tend to sit into a couple of different camps, and I think that you'll find a camp like Zooki is very versatile, mixing it into smoothies, mixing it into yogurt, mixing it into a drink, absolutely fine. The other thing is we're doing a lot of work behind the scenes. Like a lot of people will know the brand as a brand that we have a lot of liquids, they all taste good, they come in these sachets. Like you'll start to see over the coming years, we've been doing a lot of work behind the scenes on developing delivery systems for different formats. Like capsules is one that we've mentioned. There are some people, even though like if you put a gun to my head, I would recommend somebody to go for a liquid. By and large, like the capsules are great, the absorption is extremely high. You're still going to get the bioavailability results by having one of our capsules. That's what you can get. Whether you go for the liquid or the capsule, you're going to get really high absorption. You're going to get a better experience. If you like the experience of the taste and the textures and the convenience of the liquids, that's what you miss out on with the capsule. But the capsules are coming out very soon, and I think they're going to be extremely popular for certain people. Beyond that, we're doing a lot of work in other formats as well. I won't say too much now, but gut health is an area that we're looking at very hard. We're also looking at encapsulation techniques. How can we take that sort of lipid encapsulation and apply it to formulas where they're much more complex? And there are limitations with liquids. With liquids, it's not very easy to put a huge variety of active ingredients, slap it into a liquid sachet and try and get it stable. Like stability becomes a challenge the more of an active and the more you increase the variety of an active. With the drier encapsulations, although they're challenging to make and to substantiate, they do open up the doors to much more complicated formulations with a greater variety of ingredients. And I think you'll see powders aren't a million miles away for us, and also innovations around effervescence and how you can combat some of the issues, the typical issues that come up with the stability of an encapsulation in an effervescent product. So I won't go into too much detail on that. The point is that if you don't like the liquids for whatever reason and you don't like them mixed with water, we have the capsules options on the horizon. And beyond that, we're probably not going to stop investing in the R&D, and we're not going to stop bringing out new products every year for the next 10 years, or certainly as long as I'm in charge.
We have time for one more question.
Excellent.
And that is, can you take Zooki on an empty stomach, or is it better to take it with food?
I think, well, putting a nutrition hat on, if you're taking a lot of different supplements, I would always take them with food just to I do know some people who have taken supplements, and if their stomach is a bit sensitive or their digestive system is a bit sensitive, they might feel a bit nauseous when they take a lot of supplements on their own. So I would always say, if you're taking a lot, take them with food. But the nice thing about Zooki is that they are designed to be taken on their own at any time, isn't it?
Yeah, well, one of the reasons that historically, like, you've probably heard about it more so with medicines. They'll say, take it with food, take it with food. And like, if you ever wondered why that is that like some of the things that we're tapping into with these delivery systems is like food, especially fatty foods, will have lipids in there. And so like, it isn't the case that we haven't just forked this out of thin air. Like these ideas and the concepts and the premise and the logic that goes into designing these delivery systems is from food.
Yeah.
And the lipids and those fats that are found in food, they do help with bioavailability and absorption. So I think that Zooki and these types of product that we do, where there is an encapsulation and it involves lipids, they lend themselves to being taken on an empty stomach. You can do that, but like you said, if you're taking many different ones, then and your stomach is sensitive, then go for it with food. But you don't have to.
Yeah, perfect. thank you so much. That was absolutely intriguing. The whole journey there from the beginning, the thought process, what goes into it, the manufacturing journey, then what happens inside the body. It's just brilliant information for people. If you're not watching live, please don't think you can't send us questions. Please do email us with anything, and we'd also love the feedback. It's the first webinar we've done. We would love your feedback. We'd love to know if you're interested in us taking a deep dive on any other subjects, nutrition-wise, manufacturing-wise, anything at all. Jack?
Yeah, I think that, that's what I would say. I think I mentioned at the start, I think it's quite nice that we get the chance like this to go a bit deeper on the technical stuff. Like, a lot of people will know Zooki. They might, if you ask people to explain Zooki, so often they'll go, oh, it tastes good, they look good. They fall in love with those surface level characteristics. And actually, the thing that I always say is that Zooki is a lifestyle brand, yes, but it's built around those innovations in delivery systems. And having the response that we've had from putting the webinar out, I was really blown away how many people actually signed up to watch the webinar. So there's obviously a demand out there that people want to know more about the technical side, the stuff that we rarely get a chance to go into. So if there's any area, we touched on a few areas, and there's also areas that we didn't touch on. Yeah. We talked about the degradation and absorption, but we didn't talk about cellular bioavailability, and we've done a bit of work on that. We've done some studies that we haven't released yet, and I think that's a fascinating area. It's a complicated area, but it's a fascinating one. I think any of the other things, we could do a whole session on that turmeric trial. Yeah. Maybe after it's published, we could even get Dr. Luke on and some of the people behind the study to talk into that. Even with the iron study, there's loads of areas that we could go into, even future product ideas. Don't hold back. If you have ideas, what we're trying to build at Zooki is a business where we become format agnostic. We are known in the market for designing these delivery systems where if you go for Zooki over another product, you are choosing something that's more effective. That's what we want our brand to become. Yes, it's about the experience, but it's about the efficacy. And if there's other products that you want us to do in the future, let us know. If there's any topics that you want us to go deep on, just let us know. And yeah, if we can find the time, we will.
Thank you very much.